Welcome to another episode of Erik Wait Whiskey Studies, and in this video, gonna review the Glenmorangie 12-year-old Malaga Cask Finished Whiskey. So this video is part of a series that I'm doing studying for the Council of Whiskey Masters for the Level 2 Certified Whiskey Specialist or Specialist Whiskey something or other. Some Certified Specialist Whiskey or Whiskey Certified Specialist, whatever. I'm studying for the Level 2 exam. So in this video, I'm gonna talk a little bit about Glenmorangie Distillery. We're gonna look at the history, a little bit at production, and then I'm gonna review this whiskey. Glenmorangie Distillery is located near the town of Tain at the village of Firth. The Moray Firth is a roughly triangular inlet, or firth, the northernmost sea arm of the Scottish east coast. Glenmorangie Distillery is known for having the tallest stills in Scotland, as tall as the wild giraffes that roam the Highlands. The history of distilling in the area goes all the way back to 1640, in which we find the first reference to whiskey distilling near Tain. In the 1660s, illicit distilling took place on what became Morangie Farm. 1703, first written evidence of whiskey distilling at Glenmorangie when an aquavit pot with et flake and stand, whatever that means, is mentioned in the will of George Ross, great-grandson of Thomas the Abbot. In the 1730s, a brewery was built on the site that shared the farm's water source, the Tarlogie Spring. In 1811, we have the establishment of Morangie Farm. In 1818, the Morangie Farm was bought by MacDonald and Muir of Leith, who also owned later Glenmorangie and Aberlour in the 1920s. In 1843, the distillery was established when Morangie Farm was bought by William Matheson of Mackenzie and Galley, a partner in Balblair Distillery. In 1843, due to a lack of money, Matheson bought a pair of second-hand gin stills, which were very tall. By 1849, production at the distillery had reached 20,000 gallons. In 1875, John Matheson and Company was dissolved. By 1880, there are records of Glenmorangie being sold throughout Britain and exported to Rome and San Francisco in California. From 1883 to 1887, the distillery was reconstructed by Matheson and Company by William Matheson, who pioneered the introduction of steam coils to heat the wash. This continued until 1887. In 1887, the Glenmorangie Distillery Company Limited was formed and the distillery was completely rebuilt. All the stills became steam heated. From 1914 to 1918, the distillery had to cut back production due to the First World War. During this time, the distillery had to close down for 2 years due to rationing of barley and the shortage of manpower, because 75% of the local men aged between 15 and 35 signed up to fight in the war. In 1918, the distillery was sold to MacDonald and Muir, distillers and blenders of Leith, and the largest single customer of the distillery because money was needed. The MacDonald family would retain control of the company for almost 90 years. By 1920, production exceeded pre-war amounts, but prohibition was introduced. This, combined with high taxation and the general strike of 1926, kept profits down. 1929, the collapse of the American stock market, followed by world recession, nearly became fatal to the distillery. From 1931 to 1936, the distillery was closed due to the effects of the Great Depression. 1941 to 1944, the Great Depression ended with World War II, but the war effort left fuel and barley in short supply, and the distillery was again mothballed. By 1948, pre-war levels were reached again and exceeded. From 1976 to 1980, demand for Glenmorangie led to stock rationing with stock bought from blenders and brokers. From 1977 to 1979, the distillery was internally rebuilt. The number of stills was increased from 2 to 4. 1983, water supply became a concern during the 1980s when development of the land around Tarlogie Springs seemed likely. The development could have reduced the quality and quantity of water available to the distillery. So the decision was made to purchase around 600 acres of land around and including the Tarlogie Springs from the Duke of Westminster's trustees. In 1990, the number of stills was doubled again to 8. In 1991, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, visited the distillery. In 1993, the distillery celebrated its sesquicentennial anniversary with a special bottling. From 1994, the Distillery Shop opened and regular tours started, a museum opened, and on July 14, 1997, the Visitor Center was opened by Prince Andrew. In 2004, the company was sold to French drinks company Moet Hennessy Louis Vuitton for around £300 million. In 2009, 4 new stills were added, bringing the total to 12 stills. The Glenmorangie 12 Malaga Cask Highland Single Malt Scotch Whisky. This is a limited edition 12-year-old single malt from Glenmorangie. It's aged in ex-bourbon cask and then finished in a Malaga Dolce cask. Malaga is a sweet fortified wine originating in the Spanish city of Malaga, made from Pedro Jimenez and Moscatel grapes that have been dried on mats in the sun. The whiskey was bottled in August of 2020. It is bottled at 47.3% alcohol by volume and sells for around $90. So I visited Glenmorangie Distillery a couple years ago. This is a glass that I brought back. So I thought, hey, good time to use the Glenmorangie glass. Usually I like to use a Glencairn, but hey, what the heck, let's put the glass to use. It's got a nice golden color. There is just a slight tinge of red or slight tinge of pink, giving you an indication something else in there other than just, a bourbon cask. I don't know if you're going to pick that up. So it gives it a slight sort of orangish, reddish color, a little bit more golden around the edge. On the nose, pretty intense aromas, just really popping up out of the glass. So if you're not familiar with Glenmorangie, basically they start with their 10-year-old, the original, and then they build on that with other casks. So essentially this is the original for 10 years and then a couple years in a Malaga cask. Now most Malaga is actually a Muscat varietal rather than Pedro Jimenez, although they do grow Pedro Jimenez. We aren't told which grape is used out of Malaga in this. However, if I were to put some money on it, I would say it's leaning a little bit more towards the Muscat side rather than the Pedro Jimenez side. I do get an orange citrus in the background, some vanilla, a little bit of baking spices. There's a hint of a nuttiness there, a little bit of almond character, some sultanas. There's some dried black fruits there, but just a hint, not like a sherry cask, heavy sherry cask whiskey. There's a little bit of marzipan, so that almond paste going on in there. Really quite complex on the palate. One more. Really, really, really nice. Now this is a limited release. At this point, it may be a little challenging to find this. I know some other whiskey tubers have already reviewed this. There's pretty much a consensus amongst us all that this is a really fantastic whiskey. It starts off sweet on the front and then sort of dries and goes a little bit nutty on the back end. I like that. There's an occasion for, sweet upon sweet upon sweet when you want a dessert whiskey to have after dinner. But generally, I prefer it to become a little bit more dry, perhaps a little tannin to give it some structure, and a little nuttiness. I always like that. And this whiskey definitely delivers on that. So it's sweet sultanas, perhaps some honey, some orange candy up front. About midway to 3/4 on the way back, starts to dry with a little bit of a nuttiness. Get a little bit of one of those dried black fruit notes, perhaps just a hint of raisins, just a hint of golden raisins, sultanas. And it's got a, say, medium to medium plus length finish. This is really, 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 really nice. What I'm going to give in terms of score, I'm going to go solid 90 point. It has enough layers of complexity from the front to the end to get me over the 90. I like that it isn't just sweet upon sweet, that it also has some drier nutty notes. So I think it's got a lot of complexity. There's a lot of variations in the flavors. Perhaps it can feel a little thin on the palate. It's not a real thick, viscous whiskey, but if you put it on ice, I did find some of the oils would separate and you get more of a creamy feel to it. Actually, I don't want to get ice cold, but if you do cool off just a little bit, it does really, really, really well. Actually comes across almost like a real nice whiskey cocktail. Almost like it's really, really good that way. I really, really like it. I know some people, they get upset when I mention ice, but I'm living in sunny California. Right now, we're in the 90s. We had 100 degrees the other day, and putting this on ice is absolutely, absolutely delicious. It doesn't lose any of its intensity. As long as you don't let it sit there for an hour on ice, it does just fine. So, if you like these notes that I'm just describing, and you can get a bottle of this for under $100, then I would say definitely grab a bottle or two. One to drink and enjoy now, and then one to have somewhere down the road, because there aren't a lot of whiskeys, not a lot of single malts with this profile. This is a very distinct and unique profile. If you're talking sherry bomb whiskeys, they're a dime a dozen. If you're talking, first fill bourbon cask, they're a dime a dozen. There's a lot of them out there. This is a very unique and distinctive profile that I think you're definitely going to want to have in your collection. All right, that's it for this video. If you subscribe to this channel, I want to thank you very much. If you've not yet subscribed, but you like watching my videos, well, I'd greatly appreciate it if you would subscribe, ring the bell to be notified for when I go live or post new videos. And until next time, Slanjiva. Hey, don't forget to subscribe and check out these other whiskey videos.